Good afternoon, retail crew. What's up?
Ebo, buddy, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty well, Dave. Yeah, it's a beautiful day. Sun shining out there. Doing a little
Beautiful
graphic
day to
work in
be
the lab
selling
this
some
morning. Beautiful day
beautiful
to
day to
sell
be selling
weed.
some Gaston carts.
Just to be selling weed in general, whether it's a cartridge or whatever. I love it. And last I checked, people still really like weed too, so it's pretty nice.
It's still happening.
Julie, I accidentally muted you. Sorry, as the host. That was my bad.
It's okay.
Our lobby has slowed down, so I think
Yeah.
it's whenever you feel like beginning.
Okay, so I will give it a start. So, thank you all for coming to this event. This event is going to be a little bit different, I think, than some of our peer networking sessions, in that I think in a lot of these or in a lot of board meetings, you hear us, the board, speak, or staff speak, and in this one, we'd like to hear from you. So we're going to do a series of 3 of these, starting with retail today. And I've got some discussion prompts to work through. And really what these sessions will help us do is one, start getting the, information from the market that we need to build these reports that are due for the legislature for their next session. And then also help us to start thinking about, what the market would like to see when we open our rules again and start doing updates to our rules, some of which are prompted by legislative change last session. Then in some, as you know, we do kind of a review of our rules on a regular basis anyway. So the sort of like way the conversation will flow is probably pretty similar in that you all know that we've got the raise hand function. And if you can raise your hand, that'll help us keep sort of like an order to the conversation, or like avoid people kind of talking over each other. We'll make sure that folks who are on the phone, I don't see that many phone numbers, but we'll make sure we call out to folks who are on the phone and give them a time to speak. And I think the chat is open. Right, Patrick? So people can feel
Yes.
free to put things in the chat, and we'll respond the best we can and try to get as much information from the market as we can today. So that's my little start up. I will share some slides with you all. So as a kind of a discussion prompt, give me just a second. Can I get a thumbs up? Can everybody see those slides? Thumbs up, no slides?
We can see it.
Okay, all
Right,
right, here we
yeah.
go. Little delay. All right, so these are the discussion prompts for today. We'll talk about advertising, retail siting, get some feedback on the packaging and take back programs. For advertising and packaging, I would just note we have recent guidance that was updated this month and is on our website now. I'd love to get some thoughts on safe food handling procedures if we're able to do some of that. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to that point in the conversation. Let's talk about product registration. I know that's a hot topic for a lot of folks, and then event licensing too. So let's not delay. We'll jump right in. We only have an hour, so I don't want to take up too much time talking myself. So, kind of the first order of business is advertising. The legislature asked us, the board, to create a report about advertising and the impact of advertising and what the impact of modifying the law governing cannabis advertising would be. And what I'd like to hear from you all is, what is the impact of the current advertising regulations? And what ideas and proposals do you have to amend those? And how can we work within those? The other thought I have is about jurisdiction. So the board really only has jurisdiction over the licensees that we license in Vermont. We don't necessarily have a lot of authority over someone from New York or business from New York or Massachusetts. And I'd like to better understand what, if any, impact there is on licenses from other states that may find their way into advertising in the state of Vermont. So let's see who's got their hand. Does anyone? So take it away. Raise hands for folks who wanna chime in on advertising. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Julie. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Terrific. So, I'll say that, by the way, Jeffrey Piscitello, co-founder, executive director of Vermont Growers Association. Though we've got growers in our name, we do have dues-paying members that represent the entire supply chain, including over a dozen retailers. And we have a retailer working group, which deliberated this and this advertising issue and all of the other issues on this agenda pretty extensively. And just to sort of share, I think some of them are here, and I urge them to speak up and share their own thoughts. But just to encapsulate and summarize, advertising we see as flawed policy coming out of the State House. There has yet to be a uniform initiative from the industry, advocacy groups, and including the agency to reform advertising. So we think that would be a valid measure to explore perhaps in 2025, is to take on that campaign to reform advertising. That being said, we do hear mixed results, mixed impressions, such that some licensees don't really see this as an issue, and they would rather not have advertising. They see, for instance, just to share some of their concerns, small businesses traditionally do not have the budget for advertising. So this could open up a disproportionate sort of situation where those who are highly resourced advertise aggressively and those who cannot afford to advertise cannot. So that's just something to consider. I'm not saying that we particularly hold that. I just want to share that concern that is in the industry. And that as an organization, I'll just say that from a priority perspective, we're looking at things like THC cap reforms, direct sales, public consumption as greater industry priorities than advertising. So I just want to share that. And thanks for the time.
Thank you. Team Magic Man.
Hi, Julie.
Hi.
Thank you for doing this. Some thoughts from us. Need to break the stigma a little bit and at least get it to the regulations of alcohol. Advertising is debilitating, in my opinion, whether you have a small budget or a large budget. And we all feel the same about the rules and regulations. But one thing that I will say is that if we're going to have rules, they need to be consistent across the board. And I think that's the most frustrating thing for the people who are following the rules for advertising guidance. So not being able to access tourism is kind of a hard pill to swallow, and really being prohibited from being involved in our community events as well. So makes it difficult to reach the people that want to speak to us and see us. So those are the touch points we have that I wanted to share. But as a company that does submit our advertising and follow the rules and regulations, it is frustrating because it's not consistent across the board. So that is a point we wanted to make. But
Can would you mind saying a little bit more about the consistent, like which part isn't consistent? Is it
just about submitting all of your advertising and marketing to the board weekly for approval for what we do, and not seeing that consistently with other businesses because it costs money and time to be compliant. So I just feel like if we are going to have rules and regulations in place, that they should be followed and enforced throughout the industry.
okay? Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
First, thank you.
Andy?
Good morning or good afternoon, and want to echo a lot of what was just said, and also say thank you for this. Andy Goldman, the CEO of Down to the Roots in Chester, Vermont. We see, it appears like what is like a lack of enforcement. We see a lot of violations. Oh, do you hear that, or is that just mine?
Oh, we can all hear it.
Okay, let's get rid of that. Sorry.
Sorry, Andy, I muted everyone to get rid of that feedback. Andy, you may have to unmute yourself again. I'm sorry to cut you off like that. Please go ahead.
Why don't we give Andy a second to figure out audio? Oh, wait, maybe they're coming back. Go ahead, Andy, try again.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, that was probably me. We feel like there's a lack of enforcement. We see a lot of violations. We don't see anything happening, but for all we know, there is enforcement going on. But it seems like, I mean, one of the things we've been told is there's a lack of resources. But if Vermont was not the only state in the entire union of legal adult cannabis to have to, actually, we have to hand in and have the CCB review our advertising, then the CCB would have more resources for enforcement. I mean, I think it's even telling that there were other states, at least one other state, and they decided to no longer have to have advertising submitted. So I think that we should really take the view that others who have been doing this for longer have experienced. We've also received inconsistent rulings. Words that worked in one ad 2 months later don't work. We've also found that the CCB takes a very draconian interpretation of ordinary words and phrases. And it's a waste of time and valuable resources for us to argue over words and get out the thesaurus. And it absolutely shows a bias towards us as having malintent. It's both insulting and not helpful. And I think that, you know, once we're getting down to it's possible that it could be interpreted in such an extreme way when an ordinary person wouldn't read it that way. I think that's really unfair to the CCB's constituents, being us. So the CCB's absolute forbidding of anything that seems medical when it comes to an adult use dispensary is not backed up by any laws that we're aware of. We have asked the CCB to show us where that is the case. Nobody's been able to show it. So when we've had a nurse who's also a certified ganjier educating customers, so it's not even advertising, we're not even allowed to say that she's a nurse because it's medical, yet it's educational. So that's been a problem for us with advertising. And frankly, we are taking away, I mean, the CCB should be all about education. And when you have someone who's an expert in her field can help educate people, to not allow that is just, we just can't, there's no basis for that. And we think, if anything, we're hurting the Vermont residents by that lack of education. We've also, you know, things like, you know, we say we can't say therapeutics, but we have people with therapeutics in their name. And I want to say, I think we should have therapeutics in our names, because this is about health and wellness, even if we're adult use. But that's, again, an inconsistency by the CCB to allow one, but not the other. And then last, having social media posts now have to be vetted by the CCB. So you need at least 10 days. I don't think that's well thought out, because the whole, you know, the premise of social media is the spontaneity and instantaneousness. And again, if we had enforcement instead of reviews, we would be able to effect what the laws stated and what the CCB is about. And if there are fines, as a law allows, then you could fill the coffers of the CCB and you could enforce more. thank you for the time, and thank you. Sorry for the rambling, but really, really appreciate this forum.
Thank you, Andy. And this is a listening session, so I don't know if you can tell, but I'm kind of taking some copious notes
I
to
see
try
it.
and sort of, distill what folks are saying, at least in my own mind. And just to mention also, these are recorded, so the other two board members will go back and watch these series as well.
Terrific.
Yeah. Josh D.
Hi, this is Josh from Hey Bud. Just want to chime in really quick and say that, the advertising restrictions are definitely draconian and very likely unconstitutional as they're written. So any enforcement that the CCB would take over them would be enforcing an unconstitutional regulation for a lot of different reasons. Companies have free speech. Commercial free speech is an established legal concept in the United States. I just want all licensees to be aware that, even though we're federally illegal, we still have rights, barely, but we do. So, I understand folks' frustration, and I think the best thing the CCB could do is just to scrap advertising in general. I mean, we're trying to build a market, and at the end of the day, who suffers from the advertising restrictions is consumers and the market as a whole, because we're still competing against all kinds of different stuff. So it's just bad. It's bad across the board, and the end result is inefficiency, over policing of stuff that shouldn't be policed, and who really suffers in the end are consumers, and it takes away any ability for local businesses to be more creative or to connect with local consumers in ways that only they can, because they have authenticity, whereas more corporate people just don't. I think it's almost certainly unconstitutional, but at the very least, it's inefficient and kind of silly. So that's my prediction.
Thanks, Josh. Dave?
Thanks, Julie. So I don't think there's much hope for legislative change. So I think, in terms of specific proposals that the industry has, the Vermont Cannabis Action Fund went to the legislature with a lot of specific proposals. We're still for those proposals, but I think, just realistically, the legislature is not going to make changes to advertising, and the governor is probably not going to support changes to advertising laws. So I want to talk about 3 specific proposals for changes to your rules that you can do unilaterally, and I think should. One is, I never understood this from the start. Your initial rules banned any description or pictures of specific products on social media. I don't know where this came from. I don't know what the thinking was behind it. It's nuts. I mean, we can't name a product on social media. That certainly is not constitutional. That certainly is not a narrowly tailored restriction aimed at furthering a substantial state interest. But you unilaterally can change that, and you should. Another one is the health warning. The statute requires advertising carries a health warning. The CCB has interpreted that as requiring the same health warning as packaging. The statute does not require the same health warning as packaging. It requires a health warning. The result of requiring the full label on advertising is that you've doubled the price of advertising on radio. That thing takes 15 seconds to read. We want to run a 10-second ad, we got to pay for 25. There's no need for that. You can have a 1-sentence health warning, not for people under 21. There's lots of different ways to do this. You could look at other states. New York has a rotating requirement. So if you do an ad, you have to put one of several things. So 21 and over, keep out of reach of children, short, simple. The longer the health warning, the less people listen anyway. People tune this stuff out. Finally, and I don't know who's driving this in your staff, but over the last 12 months or so, your staff has taken a broader and broader construction of what is and is not advertising, to the point where now it goes beyond even any speech type activity, where now your guidance says that under certain circumstances, t-shirts bearing brands could be advertising, depending on where they're sold and the audience composition, which, by the way, is backwards, because advertising doesn't depend on audience composition. Audience composition comes into effect when something is already deemed an advertisement. So you guys got that backwards. But also, the act of selling a t-shirt is not an advertising act. It's not a speech act, right? So you're using your advertising restrictions to ban all manner of non-speech activity that the advertising rules, laws, as broad as they are, were never meant to encompass. So I think you've got some work that you can do internally in your rulemaking process and in your policymaking process, where you could take your foot off our necks a little bit and let us advertise to consumers in a responsible way. And the reason you want, or you should want, to let us advertise more directly to consumers, including specific products on social media, is that non-licensees are already doing it, right? So you've got your out-of-state actors. Sure, you got your reservation dispensary advertising in 7 days every week. But if you take a look at, you can train your Facebook algorithm to feed you cannabis ads. And there are all sorts of gray market, hemp-derived, D9, D8, D-aught, all this bullshit that nobody really wants, right, is all through my feed. And it gets advertised in ways that I can't advertise, right? And if it's coming to me, it's coming to consumers. And some of those products are dangerous, right? So why don't you let us put into consumers' mindset, buy local, buy from Vermont farmers, buy from Vermont stores, but we can't, right? And social media is the most effective, cheapest form of advertising that we have to reach in a targeted manner. So I'll leave it at that, other than saying, I think this, I agree with the folks from Tea House. This whole construct is really skating on very thin constitutional ice. I think most folks in the industry know Flora is going to file a lawsuit against the enforcement of these restrictions. And if folks here on this call have not already talked to me about that, please reach out. There is definitely room for you to participate in that effort. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. We have Dylan, Noah, and then Bridget, and then I'll try to move on to a different topic. We can come back to this certainly if we should. So Dylan, go ahead. Oh, you're still muted, or I can't hear you.
How are we now? Unmuted?
You're unmuted now.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your time. I'll make it pretty quick. I just wanted to tag on to what Andy was saying earlier, in that with how little medical dispensaries we have in the state, and with, I know medical designations are on the way. We're looking at about a year timeline, July, I think we said 2025. I think it is important that we're able to maybe start talking more about therapeutic effects. There are different studies, whether it's from Colorado University, I believe Ole Miss, or it's University of Mississippi. One of them has had a federal license to grow cannabis from a program in the late 80s, early 90s. So we should have at least a little bit of research to say certain cannabinoids, their acid chains, certain terpenes, flavonoids, and the volatile organic compounds do have X therapeutic effects. And to tag along to, I believe, what Dave was saying, is that can be part of the warning is, while not studied by FDA, these are third-party studies. I think when we have so many people who are looking for pain relievement, anti-anxiolytic, and all these effects, and we're very restricted as a retailer of what we can and can't say or how we can advertise product, it is harder for people to find those therapeutic effects when I believe we have 2 medical dispensaries in Burlington. I may be wrong with the little bit of the geography, but someone in Newport, Vermont can't really drive 2.5 hours to a medical dispensary. And how are we to convey that, yes, we can maybe alleviate these pains therapeutically, even if the verbiage has to be just a little more strict than a medical language? but how can we open that up? I think like Andy was saying, so that people know we can provide those effects. So just thank you for considering that.
Thank you. Noah.
Hi. Yeah. So in addition to agreeing with what, most of what's been said, including that I view the advertising enforcement and policy to be onerous, overreaching, it's expensive and time consuming, and it's hurting small businesses, which is the vast majority of the businesses in this space. I guess I wanted to add that I would love to see a proactive approach, with the state. I know that the legislature has made this difficult, but could we get some proactive advertising done by the state, tourism, like we do in other industries, to promote Vermont cannabis as a whole, to support our industry, to get people and educational content that's not just old-fashioned scare tactics of, driving high and overdosing potential with THC. Like, let's talk about why it's important to shop at dispensaries and buy legal quality products, craft, cared for, really sustainably grown products that you can find in Vermont that is unique from, a lot of what's in the illegal market currently and what's in a lot of other states around us. We need support. We need less. Yes, we all need to follow the rules, but also this is a tough industry. I think people need to understand it's a tough industry. We need the support of the state, just like we have other industries from craft beer to cheese have that support. We need support to get the tourism, to get even the local people to be willing to walk into a dispensary. There's a lot of people that are still very nervous about walking into a dispensary that really would benefit from some basic social marketing campaigns that describe how it is safe, it is quality products. There's different ways, not just smoking, that you can take cannabis to help with issues and to replace opioids, to replace really damaging things in our communities. So, sort of trying to stay proactive with that side of things. And I don't know if there's room for that, but I would love to see some effort towards that. And I think probably we would even collectively be willing to throw some money into that effort to make a statewide campaign.
Noted. Thanks, Noah. I appreciate that. Bridget.
Hi, just quickly, I agree with everything. That fact that not definitely does not.
I don't know if it's just me, but I'm only getting every other word. I don't know if you want to turn off your camera, Bridget. I don't know if something is, but I'm only getting every other word. Sorry.
Okay. Is this better?
Yes.
Okay. So just wanted to underline that not being able to really affects us bringing in customer. So important. And I just agree with everything that's been said here. So, and the other piece would be that I think it would be really great for we don't have frosted windows. We think lighting environment, but that means that we really important packaging.
I'm still only hearing, I don't know if, again, I don't know, Patrick, is it just me that I can only hear every couple of words?
No, I could
No, we
not
can't
hear
hear it. We
that.
can't hear it either.
Bridget, you're welcome to, if it sounds like maybe there's a problem with your microphone or something, if you wanted to just put your question in the chat. And yeah, we have others in the chat saying the same thing. So you could put your question or comment in the chat if you'd like, or that way we can keep moving.
Okay. Sorry, Bridget. So I think we'll move on to the next topic. If we have time at the end, we can come back to advertising. But let's talk about the retail siting, because that is something that the CCB now can make rules around. And so in the last session, Act 166 allows the board now to create some rules around how, density, population of of retailers. And what I would like to know is, how would the market like to see the board approach this? Should we be looking at population density? Should we be looking at square miles in distance? What are the thoughts that you all have around this? Looks like Dove has their hand up. Oh, hang on, you're muted.
Sorry about that. This is
Okay.
Dove from the gas station. I'm pretty surprised the CCB was given this power to begin with. I think it's much more of a town's right issue than a CCB issue. But to go from there, I think it puts us in a very vulnerable place as far as renewals, which is no language in here. And can the CCB all of a sudden decide that maybe we've got 3 or 4 great stores operating, but does that give them the power to say that all of a sudden only 2 can operate, even though multiple have been in business? It seems like puts us in a very vulnerable position without that language there. And like I said before, I think this is up to each town. If a town wants to have 14 dispensaries, that's up to the people of those towns. If a town wants to only have 1 dispensary, once again, that's up to the town officials. But unfortunately, this has somehow gotten to the CCB, and I think it opens up a little bit of a dangerous course of who gets what and who can lobby for themselves. As far as who gets that next license and how do we as current retailers feel comfortable maintaining our license, or is the CCB going to say, you know what, oops, we already licensed too many, you're out. I think it's really concerning and it's really broad-ended, and in my personal opinion, the CCB shouldn't have control over this at all. It should be directly to your town officials.
Okay.
Thank you for your time, and I appreciate the question.
Yeah, thank you. Because that was my other question is, there's been this sort of, I don't know that it's really ambiguous in the law, but there has been this sort of like, where does the town's control begin and end? And I don't know a lot of towns that have put in place or tried to put in place particular rules around, a number of retailers or anything like that. So understanding, that folks would like to see their towns be more involved and have a little bit more local control, that's very, very helpful.
I mean, our town's understanding right now is that they don't have control over this and that the CCB has control over this, and that should be given back to each individual town to decide what is right for them, because there is a very vast diversity in our town's opinions, and I think each of them should be able to be represented however they see fit.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Dave.
Under state law, towns don't have the ability to say how many stores of a particular type of store, and that's not just cannabis. That's true of, I don't know, gas stations, car dealerships, and under cannabis law, the town, once the people vote in, has no control at all. Look, I think we're at a point where in many places, including Rutland, there is a real risk of oversaturation. Oversaturation will lead to price collapses. That's what has happened in every other state. That's bad for retailers. That's bad for farmers. I know there are some folks who think that more stores will mean more places to sell into. Sure, but it'll mean selling into at severely depressed prices. You don't have to take my word for it. You can just look at every other state that's done this. I look at Oregon as the poster child of what not to do. There is 1 licensed retailer in Oregon for every 5,000 residents of Oregon. The price per pound in Oregon is under $800, and that's when that's in summer when the outdoor crop is not flooding. Oregon bottomed out at $397 a pound wholesale in fall harvest, I think 2018. Those are scary numbers. Those are numbers that put Vermonters out of business. I think the sort of right number it should be somewhere around. I think the CCB could be looking at it from a population density perspective. I would look at it from a county perspective, because we have really tiny towns, towns with 100 people. So I would look at it from a county perspective. I think if you'd be aiming for something like one store for every 10,000 residents, you would have something that is a viable market. I think when you go anything lower than that, you start getting into some pretty scary numbers. And again, this is all borne out through other states. So that's what I would recommend. One for every 10,000 population in a county. You don't have to go into specific towns because of the size of our towns.
Yeah.
I would not recommend to the legislature to add any more local control to the towns, because what will happen then is those select boards, which are predominantly governed by older and more conservative voices in the town, and that's every town, even liberal towns like Middlebury, where I am, very conservative select boards. They will just ban cannabis stores, and that's why we have the system we have now. Is because we wanted to take it out of the hands of the select boards and put it in the hands of the voters. So if you allow select boards and zoning administrators to set limits, those limits will be zero. Thanks.
Thank you. And I appreciate the county look rather than just town, because as you know, we have this opt-in provision. And so like we have Burlington with a great deal of density, but there's none in South Burlington, none in Williston. And so looking at it at a county perspective is I appreciate that. Jeffrey.
Thank you. So just to provide some context for everybody here, when this language was proposed this past legislative session, correct me if I'm wrong, but the CCB did not introduce this policy, nor did it have the agency support in committee at that time. And I think that's important because it is broadly not seen as a priority nor a conversation to be having, not even 3 years into the market. What is often framed as a market saturation issue is actually a product supply issue. It is actually a bottleneck. We are an opt-in state. About 30% of our state has voted to opt in for retail sales. We should be doing the opposite of what this policy insinuates, which is limiting retail licensing. We should be expanding retail licensing. We believe that limiting licensing creates a lose-lose situation that we have seen play out in other states. And I also like to point out that drawing analogies to other states such as Oregon does a disservice to our own market here in Vermont, because our market is different from those states. So we need to be really careful about drawing those analogies and those lessons learned in those states and applying them to our state when we have a different market structure. So thank you.
Thank you. Andy.
Thank you. So I do have to disagree with the last speaker, respectfully, of course. We are cannibalizing each other. The more dispensaries that we have, combined with the lack of ability to advertise, just as an industry, not a Vermont issue, the lack of ability to educate. I think everybody on this call has agreed it's hard to do business in this industry. We are one dispensary in one town, and that's how the CCB has been looking at this, as per town, and that's an absolute mistake in our opinion. 2 or 3 meetings ago, the CCB put up a chart only looking at multiple locations in a town. We're in a rural area. We have, within 20 minutes of each other, there are 4 dispensaries. Any more, somebody's going to be going out of business. And if we go out of business, then the state's desire to have a legal industry goes away. I've been investing and working in legal cannabis in other places in the country for 10 years. And it is when there is not either a cap or somehow a limitation, it hurts the business, it hurts the industry, it ends up back on the black market. We also did a population density by county and showed it to the CCB. It was rebuffed, but what it showed is that the 2 lowest counties in Vermont are absolutely already oversaturated on a demographic basis. And we have to look at Vermont. If you look at it as tourism, you have to look at it as the current population, because they are here, the full-time population, year round. Mud season, very, very difficult for those of us in rural areas, and it's hard enough to do business. We applaud that you're looking at this. We agree it should either be on a county basis or a certain geographic mileage basis based on full-time demographics. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Colleen.
Oh, hello there. I just wanted to bring up the point, like, if they're going to look at limiting locations, like I'm all the way in southern Vermont in Bennington, and I have one other store in my town. And I feel the impact of that store, but I also feel the impact of the 5 stores across the border 10 minutes away in Massachusetts. And those are my real competition. And that's even when we're talking about advertising, that's what hits me the worst, because I have different rules. I'm playing by totally different rules here in Vermont, which are a lot stricter than the people in Massachusetts right over the border. And that's a whole different marketplace. And I feel like if you're going to consider this, you also have to consider what's outside, like those might not be in Vermont, but they're so close to me. It's a definite impact. So it's not only what's in your town, and if you're going to look at counties, for us on the borders, especially this Massachusetts border that's active right now and has a really active system, and then New York is going to be the same way as they get off their system going. So that's another thing to think about, because I really want as many cannabis businesses to succeed in Vermont as possible. So just something else to think about, especially for border towns.
Thank you. Josh. Josh, did you want to chime in on this, or is that an old hand up? Okay, we'll move on to Jahala.
Hi all, thanks for having us. I just wanted to tune in with my experience being one of 14 dispensaries in Burlington. I will say that I find this a little funny because the CCB, from what I'm seeing, already had the ability to issue licenses, although on a priority basis, but there was no timeline attached. The original bill included language to take into account minority and women-owned retailers, and I quote, the geographic distribution of cannabis establishments based on population and market needs. I don't think this is an issue that can be helped at this point because it was already screwed up. To talk numbers, if we want to talk numbers, in Burlington, we're talking one dispensary for every 3,500 people. I will say at this point, I think we can fix the issue by allowing the focus on advertising laws. So this freedom of marketplace approach when it comes to licensing will also allow for a free market approach when it comes to advertising. Thank you.
That's a good point, Jahala. Thank you. Dylan.
Dylan, you're muted.
Oh.
Thank you, guys. I apologize.
Okay.
I just wanted to comment, and I think that maybe we should make a dedicated meeting to address this issue specifically, again, with our retailers. I think a lot of us feel pulled between both what Dove and Dave were saying, how municipality opt-in might not be the best, but allowing them to decide versus just the VCCB, it's a very hard issue to maybe just do within a 10-15 minute period. We have about 647,000 people in the state. If we limited by a 10,000 person, just to make numbers really even, that caps our state at 64 dispensaries. If we look again in like the Orleans County area, Derby has 3. It's, I believe, Cushies, Kingdom Boys, and the High Country. And there's less than 10,000 people in the 3 neighboring cities altogether, or very close to. So it does make it hard when we're putting such a rigid number on business without maybe looking at some more direct values, seeing where some of the dispensaries are at, because that might affect a significantly smaller town. Like I think someone in the chat mentioned Montpelier is just shy of 9,000 total people, and there were a few dispensaries in there. Versus again, you know, if we're driving through Rutland, there might be a lot, but you know, who really is it a VCCB? Is it a municipality, or should we have a voting stake as retailers as well, and we all get to put an opinion, because it is a business where we're doing a limitation possibly, where other businesses have more free flow of, can the city decide restaurants, liquor stores, bars, not to compare directly to liquor, but to say that when we use adult recreation, other people have lighter regulations. I think this particular act should maybe get more than just the dedicated 5 to 15 minutes as we go through. Just thank you guys.
Yeah, for sure. And just to, that's a good point. And I wanted to just also mention, so this will be part of we'll make rules around this. So there'll be ample opportunity to submit public comment and have other conversations around this as we get kind of more towards the formal process of rulemaking related to this. I just want to take 1 second and give an opportunity to the folks on the phone. I see 2 phone numbers. So if either one of those folks wants to comment on either the
I'm back
retail
to.
Oh, Josh, great. So let's just give a second to see if the folks on the phone want to comment on either advertising or retail siting, and I'll give that just a second. If you want to unmute, it's *6. All right, so Josh, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just want to say that, you know, we're retailers, we're in Burlington. There's lots of retailers in Burlington. So, you know, we're sympathetic to people who feel that, and definitely think that's largely a byproduct of, you know, retail being opt-in, which was probably just bad legislation from the jump. But, you know, we're also growers, and growers are subject to very intense competition. You know, we don't have government intervening on our interest often, and we don't support any policies that are designed to create an anti-competitive environment on the retail level of the market. If your business model doesn't work in this industry, we don't think the government should step in and save you. It's just sort of what it is. We see this plant as being, you know, still criminalized until it's as free as a tomato. And, you know, we think that people's and what they're doing should, you know, either be successful or not based on whether people who enjoy consuming cannabis recreationally or medicinally are willing to pay you for it or not. We don't think that people should be protected. That opens the door for corruption. It opens the door for, you know, like whether it's town boards that are older conservative, only supporting other old and conservative companies versus, you know, other ones. It's just a very, very slippery slope. And, you know, it's honestly not fair to ask the government to step in and ensure the value of your business. So there's a lot of self-interest at play in this rulemaking, and there's a lot of people who, you know, are thinking that they're entitled to their market or entitled to their consumers or entitled to the margin that they're making off of other growers' hard work. And that's not true. We are not entitled to it. You need to add value. It needs to be worthwhile for someone to come into your dispensary and pay you versus paying, you know, for it somewhere else in the illicit market or in Massachusetts or whatever, you know, like that is consumer spending at the end of the day. And it's really not fair. And that's not how it works in any other industry. So the sense of entitlement that exists is really mind-boggling to me sometimes. And we all need to be thinking about how we're helping the market and how we're actually adding value and giving the government the power to protect your interests is just like Soviet-style cronyism, and it's kind of pathetic. So.
Thank you. So I would say that in the state, that's because it's come up a couple times, and I think somebody put it in the chat, but with liquor, because I think this question has been asked, there really can only be, I think it's 1 per town. That is very controlled how many there are, but different from the cannabis market, the liquor is actually sort of owned by the state and put into those liquor stores through that process. So it's not quite the same market, if you will. So with that, I think we'll move on to the next topic, which is packaging and packaging take back. So this is one I think we hear a lot about, and you know, as everyone knows, it's anything that's intended for the consumer is intended to be reusable. We do have some new guidance on how to sanitize packaging for folks who want to do a package take back program. What I'm wondering about in this regard is how can we encourage this? How can we improve the practices? And what are the industry's perspectives on these? Go ahead, Jesse.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. What's always struck me about packaging, I mean, I wholeheartedly agree we need to get away from convenience in, you know, food and just in general in our lives, because convenience and price is always going to mean more plastic, which is, you know, killing us all. But the idea that it's cannabis's job in Vermont to solve packaging, something that food industry and no one else is willing to tackle, seems really unfair to say, okay, cannabis, you have to figure out, you know, sustainable packaging. You were going to do a take back program. We're going to create all this complications. It's expensive, and, you know, insurance issues come into this as well. It just seems really unfair that we have to champion this on top of all the other regulation and challenges. And as you're trying to develop a brand, that also, you know, packaging is a big part of the brand. So I just don't think that like forcing like a take back program, you know, without the state funding this, or the state like taking this on and being like, we got this great program and it's going to be fine. I mean, that even seems sketchy too. So I just don't really agree with this approach. I'm not sure what the approach is yet, but certainly open to talking about it. I think it's a great idea, but people should be able to opt in and do what they want with that, as opposed to like a general responsibility of us to solve this much larger problem. I mean, we are a fraction of the waste. Go to the grocery store. That's where the waste is at. Go to your co-op. Tons of stuff in plastic there. Well, why does cannabis have to solve this problem on its own? Thank you.
I do. And just to add to the conversation, I am noticing like health and beauty products are more and more in glass packaging. So like Neutrogena has started switching like to glass packaging for almost everything. So I wonder, although it's slow, right? Every now and then you see a new product in glass. I wonder if that changes the calculus for folks, if that's kind of where other industries go to. So just to put that in folks' heads to think about as well. Michelle, go ahead. Oh, you're muted.
I'm a product manufacturer, and I've kind of just given up on the CCB changing the rules and us having to use the Humidico jars and lids. But we actually ran out of jars about 3 weeks ago. And long story short, it takes a while to get there. So we had over 4,000 labeled jars sitting in a storage unit of old labels that we can't use anymore. 2,000 of them were because a product was approved and then was taken back. But so we actually sat there with 3 people trying an unreal amount of methods to remove labels and sanitize them. And without machines, I can tell you it is not possible. It's not profitable. And the CCB is going to have to use some of this funding to put a procedure in place for this. There's absolutely no way to do it. We worked the cost of goods for that at about 78 cents when the jar itself only costs 29 cents.
78 cents to include the label, Michelle, is that what you're saying? Or the 78 cents for the
label?
Okay.
To remove the label and then sanitize it and remove, well, the adhesive's the big part. You can get the label off, but then you're left with an unreal amount of adhesive. 78 cents in labor or in cost between water, alcohol. We used a heating machine, 78 cents. It's not realistic. It's not even close. Now, if we had a huge machine that was meant for this, I'm sure that could be brought down to close to the 29 cents. And that would be without anyone making a penny off of it.
Thank you. That's helpful to understand the cost of removing the label and sanitizing the packaging. Thank you. Dove?
We just did it to 1,400.
You did it for 14, and that, sorry, just before you go, Dove, the 78 cents is on top of the cost of the 20-cent packaging. Is that right?
29
Michelle?
cents, yes.
29
For the
cent
just the
packaging.
jar is 29 cents. The lid is
Okay.
31 cents.
Okay.
And you can't
Go
reuse
ahead.
the lids. They do not sanitize properly because of the fact that they're
The
home
little
compostable. You
thinness.
can't, you
Yeah,
can,
yeah.
yeah, you can UV sanitize it, but even then I didn't feel comfortable. I wouldn't feel comfortable reusing a lid for someone.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Dove.
Hey guys. Sorry about that. I'm at the shop today. Right now, I really urge people to do their research when it comes to take back programs. Call your insurance company first because you will lose your insurance. It is not considered safe, and I really hope that people are thinking of their employees and their consumers first. Who opens that jar and what comes into your store is your responsibility. I personally have worked in another state's market, certainly not as an owner, but we worked with there was a company at the time that was doing takebacks, and you put it in a special box and it went off for sanitation, and that led our store to a fentanyl exposure. I just want to put that right out there. When you are bringing things back in that have been out on the streets, anything can happen. And my number one job as a retailer is to keep my staff safe and to keep my customers safe. I do not believe, even with the sanitation methods that the CCB has put out right now, that avoids that situation happening. And that could happen to any single one of us taking any sort of jar in from a human being, period. I think the CCB needs to be focused on compostability and how we can do that within our own state instead of shipping recycled jars to North Carolina and not even getting them recycled to begin with. So, and having machines to wash them are completely unfeasible for 90% of our store's footprints in this state. It is completely dangerous. And I think you would be very surprised when you see jars that have been used multiple times by a customer come in and try to be returned of how that sanitation is actually going, because it is incredibly difficult without industrial methods to remove all trace. And who is opening that jar is the most vulnerable. And unfortunately, that would be one of my staff members. It's not a risk I'm willing to take. I am 100% bulk. If the CCB really wanted to start reducing packaging, you should have forced every store to go bulk. That's the truth. I don't believe in that. I think everyone has the right to have their brand on a jar if that's what they choose. But if we want to talk about reducing packaging in general, that's where you would start. It's disturbing to me that people are pushing this take back program to get monetary kickbacks from the CCB. That you don't get monetary kickbacks for recycling at your house, for example. If this is not a can return program down the street, this is very different, and this is ingestible stuff that we are putting in our bodies. And number one needs to be protecting our staff and our consumers. And I think the staff members have been completely forgotten with this policy. Thank you for your time.
Julie, you're muted.
Now I'm muted. There's a truck outside my window, so I apologize if you can hear that. But Dylan is next on the list.
Thank you again for having me. I think this is another subject where takebacks and recycling just in general, before we focus on CCB, is important. We want a program where recycling, where we're not just wasting. I think that is important. And for maybe those businesses, the manufacturers that do want to do takebacks, whether we incentivize with something or not can be discussed. But if we are going to initiate this as a program in Vermont, there should be something very clear on policy and procedure, as well as I think what Dove was saying is safety. If there are things that are being left over, residuals, what have you, what is the best practice for removal? And if we're saying it's extremely high water, UV, alcohol, what have you, it shouldn't be a higher cost than what we were discussing. And then on a separate note, I know that I agree a little bit with Jesse. I think we were talking in the tea house a little bit is, you know, what would be the, I don't want to say harm, but what is the negative aspects of allowing a small tier 1 or 2 or a small tier manufacturer using a recyclable plastic, whether it's manufactured from sugarcane, hemp, what have you, until they can get to a point again where they can almost be on a steady foot. I know that with, I think it's our manufacturing license, it's based on annual revenue or quarterly revenue of size and different things. I know we have different rules in place. Is that something we could translate to packaging as well, when we talk about plastics, recyclable plastics, and just compostables in general? It is hard for a tier 1 grower to then have to spend, you know, buy a bulk 50,000 purchase of glass and then label. And, you know, are we really doing this for our industry, or like was Jesse saying, are we trying to pick up the slack from other industries? And as you mentioned, Julie, is I think it was Neutrogena moves towards glass. Does the price translate to everyone else? Are these packaging more affordable? Because that also feels like if we're forcing certain packaging rules without considering all ramifications, that also is hindering both retail and the cultivation side. Thank you, guys.
Go ahead, Colleen.
Hello, I just wanted to mention a couple of things that we're doing here that are a little bit different, that help us with our packaging and our take backs. We allow people to reuse their jars. So we do a lot of bulk sales so people can bring a jar back in with them. So bring your own jar, you get $1 off. I discount their purchase because it's saving me that extra cost. And that gets taken advantage of so much. And I even do it for like bulk pre-rolls, like bring in a tube or a thing and we'll put the a new label on it and we'll send you out the door. So that's really helped me a lot in reducing the packaging within the store, especially for all of our bulk products. And then the other thing is I wanted to agree with what Michelle said. We take back our empty jars, but we do it, they get cleaned and then they get scraped and then they get painted. And then we have a big mural across one whole side of my store that was made from painted and recycled jars. And I'm pretty sure I'm the only person in the state that's making an art project out of their take back jars. And I just wanted to say it is so hard to get them clean. And I mean, we've been doing this now for almost 2 years and we have a pretty good method, but I still wouldn't give that back to a customer as a clean jar. You know, it's just clean enough to be painted and put on the wall. So I don't know about the whole sanitation and reusing the jars. That seems like it would just be unbelievably burdensome and not very safe. But I feel like finding some other use for them is something really great that can be celebrated. I don't know how many people are going to come up with crazy projects, but that's what we did to kind of get around this, because it's a huge thing and there's so many jars out there. So that's what we're doing to kind of combat.
Thank you. Noah.
Yeah, so I guess I kind of said this before, but I feel that this industry, we're all new businesses. We are way overburdened with tax and regulation as it is. And I would encourage CCB to do whatever they can to reduce that burden and not add more things on our plate. When it comes to packaging, we understand the mandate of no plastic from the legislature. Anything that the CCB can do to reduce additional restrictions beyond that, I would highly encourage CCB to do. Take back program just feels way out of touch to me. Go talk to Whole Foods and Trader Joe's about that. They've got resources to do these programs. We don't. Get batteries take back. Like there's much bigger fish to fry when you're talking about sustainability. We are small businesses fighting to make a business work. We can't handle like innovative efforts like Colleen's doing and like we're doing some of that. That's great. That should be totally voluntary if people can do it. I do not want to put any additional burden on any other cannabis companies at this time. It's just going to get more and more hard. And someone might try something today, then it won't work tomorrow. The other main point I want to make is compostable. It's a joke. I worked in the compost industry. I've seen all these purveyors of compostable material. Go to any composter, especially go to an organic gardener, and ask them about how those compost and in these bags, let alone throw a label on them, and they are 100% not compostable. So we're not and who's composting these? I'd love to see a study of how much bags are actually getting composted, especially the lids. If there's microplastics, these are not good for the environment, and they're not recyclable. It's, I think, arguably worse than plastic. When we were really advocating for composting in the state of Vermont, I was part of helping write that legislation. Everybody across the board, from NOFA to all the composting companies, were very against these supposedly compostable goods. So thinking that's a solution, I think, just doesn't keep up with what we know in the state of Vermont and what farmers and agricultural people know. It's contamination, it's garbage. And we're paying about 5 times more, maybe more than 5 times the cost of what even giving us the opportunity to have other suppliers. If we're talking about the compostable bag, sure, let's at least have the ability to have the spec and source it wherever we want. We're stuck with a very limited number of suppliers for stuff that we can get on the market for half the price compostable. And I would argue that I'm not sure. I'd like to see the life cycle analysis of comparing Mylar bags to the compostable bags that are not actually composted. Let's understand this from a real scientific perspective versus just knee-jerk, greenwashing. Thanks.
Thanks, Noah. Given that we're kind of at time, I want to move. If people can stay on, that's great. But just to make sure I hit what I think are the hot topics for the industry, I'm going to pass over food safe handling for now and go to product registration requirements, because I think that's one that folks will want to give some feedback on. So, like the others, I'm wondering how this could be more efficient. This process, what you're seeing on your end. We've spent some time here in our office with our staff trying to figure out where the efficiencies are and how we can make this process a little bit more efficient. So why don't you go ahead and share see, I knew there would be hands up. Go ahead, Dave.
PR ideally would be changed to a registration, not a license. And so you would let people submit and sell and get that number right away. And then you guys in the background can review. And if you see something wrong, you can ask for it to be fixed. I asked for data from your staff just last week. It seems that about 97% of product registrations are approved in the first action taken by the CCB. That's a number that tells me that there's not a problem being solved by having everything be reviewed before it goes to market. The problem is created by the review because more than half of the product registration requests take 2 weeks or more, with over a third taking 3 weeks or more. That's unacceptable. And again, it's just unnecessary. So let's say you have, I'll give you an example of what we do. We're a retailer and we also have a wholesale license. We'll buy material, we'll make pre-rolls for ourselves. Sometimes we have extra material. We like to offer it to other retailers that we work with. For us to do that, we can sell it ourselves under our bulk pre-roll registration, but then to offer it to another retailer, if I wanted to make 100 pre-rolls for them, let's say, I would have to go and register that as a new product, wait 3 weeks, and by which point my retail partner doesn't need that product anymore. So you're just slowing things down. You're making small scale operations really inefficient. That takes away, a real market efficiency. That's just, and again, you do that without actually providing any public safety benefit, because again, 97% of the submissions are approved in the first go. And most of those that aren't approved are sent back because they're missing something on a technicality, like, oh, you didn't send us this COA or that COA, not because there was anything wrong with it. You offer recall power. You have fines, the ability to levy fines for bad actors. There are a few bad actors out there. You guys have been going after one of them in particular. You pulled their license recently. The PR system is not the place to do that policing in advance. It's a good way to do that policing retroactively, and you really should go that way.
Thank you. Michelle.
I definitely agree with a little bit of what Dave said, but I actually disagree with a decent amount of it. I think it's very, very important that every single product needs to be reviewed. This Holland cannabis thing could be so much worse if they would have put out 40,000 pre-rolls that were all contaminated, and then if their registration could have caught it versus no, or if the test results are wrong. A manufacturer could think that their variance is 25%. In all actuality, it's 10 on something over 100 milligrams. And everyone thinks it's right. And then someone gets it, the variance is 25%, and it's a huge problem. If we could make it quicker, under a week, I think would be great, especially renewals. I had a renewal sitting for about 3 months, and it waited until the day before they told me I was missing something. If we could, I'd be willing to pay more for registrations if that meant we could get them done in a week. If that meant we could bring on someone just for registration, I would pay $75 each. And the fairness. There's stuff that I have 2 compliance officers, and I've had the 2 of them look at the same product, and one found a problem with the graphics and the other one didn't. That is definitely a huge issue. There's a lot of looseness around that. And if we had this, a set person that does it, or set people, then we could keep it fair, because there's no reason that. And then I had a product that was in place the first year. Second year, it was renewed by a different person, and they said, no, I had to change it. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Dylan.
Thank you again, guys. I'm going to take a slightly different approach from my retail perspective. Pretty much every vendor that comes to the tea house, they have everything perfectly ready for us before they even get in. But we do notice sometimes in the middle of the week, a P number gets updated, and it appears that the Excel and PDF sheets are only getting updated on Fridays, if that. I've noticed that sometimes maybe it's just the dates aren't getting updated versus like some of those P numbers change. But if we could move to maybe a 3 times a week or a daily check for P numbers on the VCCB side, because if we're trying to sell a product and I get an error on, we do use Dutchie integration. So Dutchie will tell me if a P number does not match. It does take a few minutes to start searching, as well as I think we need better search functionality for those systems. Excel is awesome, PDF is fine, but to open up an Excel sheet, hit Control F and start looking, if someone's growing Gary Payton, there's 9 growers growing this, there's 50 products of Gary P. So if we could add more refinement to maybe a search bar where I can filter by vendor, filter by whoever, and then on top of, I noticed Michelle is saying that a product registration doesn't change, but sometimes, growers had a product for almost a year and they are getting approved. And so we are noticing that there are number changes regardless of, which vendor has a P number change. We are seeing that on product, whether it's, the last year's registration just got renewed or however that process goes. We've had issues over here with those matching the database and then that database not being updated.
Okay, thank you. Ebo.
Thank you. So I agree 100% with what he was just saying. Like, from a retail perspective, the product registration numbers not being the same is just like a huge burden on everybody to change those out. I think it would, for renewals, it makes sense to me to just keep that product registration number the same throughout the lifespan of the product. The other thing that's really frustrating, and like, Dave said 2 to 3 weeks, we've had stuff go for a month that doesn't get registered. And then, I speak to every vendor who comes in the store. So I have people that are like, oh yeah, I can just call up so-and-so and my product's registered in a week, or that day they register it right away. So it's not like a fair playing field for everybody trying to get products registered, for one. And then to like echo like what Michelle was saying, a lot of times, you know, the compliance officer that's looking at them like might not know the product manufacturing type well, you know, so could like put something in incomplete or tie it up because their knowledge isn't there like on the particular product that they're registering. So I think, you know, getting those compliance officers or I think someone should be doing it specifically. I think that's also great too. Like someone's job is to do product registration only. And then also what would be great is if you could kind of have an alert, and I don't know if you could do this with Onward and BIA, if like, for example, gas and live resin cartridges, we have 14 different varieties of live resin cart. Is there any reason I should wait 30 days just to get a new strain registered that's in the same box, the same cartridge? It's the same process. Like I should be able to show a past COA and you're registered, right? It seems like a lot of steps for the same product, just a new strain. So if there was some way that, you know, again, you get an alert, you have a past COA, all the same packaging that could go like in an instant approval, something like that.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, Eddie.
Hey, thank you. Eddie from Winooski Organics here. My thoughts on product reg. You know, I think, you know, its main purpose should be to protect the consumer, and, you know, it should be integrated with the track and trace system. So as soon as these growers have strains with COAs, it gets a number and it's tracked. And, you know, I buy bulk from my store, and there's a huge hole right now where they don't have to register their strains before it gets to me. So I don't know what I'm at if the COAs are real that I'm looking at. That should be, you know, something that's looked at by the CCB, and if it's good to go, like I'm gonna buy it, you know. But right now I'm buying all this unregistered, you know, cannabis, and, you know, trusting my vendors that they're sending me legit COAs, and I'm checking them before it hits my shelf, where I don't know if this is an approved product. So you know, I think it ultimately should be protecting the consumer there, and there should be CCB eyes on that stuff throughout the whole track and trace it, you know, process. And that way there's no holdup at all. You know, if you have good COAs, you're good to go, you know.
Yeah.
But I know, you know, and I've expressed this to some people in the past in the CCB, and you know, we've gotten the answer of, oh, well, registration is more about packaging than anything. So they want to make sure your packaging is compliant. Well, you know, I don't think that's necessarily should be the focus there. I think it should be, you know, I get my packaging registered and they get their strains registered, you know. Yeah, so that's how I feel it should be. But thank you for your time.
Thanks, Eddie. Dove.
Hey guys, I'll be quick. One thing I do think that the CCB could enact that would take a lot of burden off of stores who do buy bulk is to piggyback off of Eddie. I think all COAs for any product sold in the state should be on the CCB website, period. The fact that each retailer has to update their personal website and put these little QR codes or URLs, it seems like really faulty, and that there can be a lot of holes and delays. Whereas I would much prefer any customer who comes in to any dispensary in Vermont be able to just simply access that from the state website. I think that's the safest, easiest way to have all information in one place for any consumer. And if it's a registered product, I think that should be open information for any consumer to have. And it shouldn't really be on the burden of a manufacturer to have the QR code. That should be funneled into one area. You shouldn't need a smartphone to access the QR code for it, where they can go on and find any test results for any product name. And that includes bulk flower, that includes any edible, that includes a vape cartridge. I completely agree with Eddie, where if we want to stick with this product registration system, which clearly has its flaws, it should be about not only packaging, it's number one should be protecting the consumer. And the easiest way to do that is full transparency, and putting that full transparency on the retailer seems risky. to me. And it seems like a really big extra. I know I'm not a web designer. I have to pay somebody else to do that. It seems like it could be really easily found on the CCB website and something that's just clear and easy and things are updated. I know that anything that sounds easy probably isn't for you guys, and I understand that. But when it comes to just uniform safety, I think having that directly to the CCB website of all test results is the easiest way to do that, in full transparency, period. I think what's sad is that a lot of the smaller bulk growers sometimes don't have the funds of $50 to go register just a particular strain. And when it can take up to 8 weeks, I know for my bulk registration, I had to call my compliance officer the day before, even though it had been sitting in a queue for 2.5 months, and say, what am I doing tomorrow? Am I closing my store? Or am I going to continue to sell? And then all of a sudden it was pushed through. There's definitely a huge discrepancy of people getting their PRs pushed through by their compliance officers and some not. And if there was a adequate timeline, because if I'm a small tier 1 bulk grower, I don't want my products sitting for 2.5 months waiting on a PR code before it gets to the store. Once it's cured and once that test results are back, I want that to hit the market and be at its best form for the consumer. And right now, product registration doesn't allow that, which is why I think you're seeing not a lot of bulk growers bothering to register. Whereas I think all of it should be registered and all of it should be in one place where those test results can be found for every product to ensure open transparency and safety.
Thank you. We do have, there is a product registration list on our website, but it doesn't have, I think what your main point is access to the test results. There's no link to the test results in that
Right.
Excel.
And for a flower buyer, like, to me, that's some of the most important test results.
Right.
And to put that all on each individual website seems really bulky and not very uniform for consumers. Especially if I was a tourist driving through the state, how would I ever figure that out? I would just want all test results on this website, done. Doesn't matter what store I'm shopping at.
Okay. All right, thanks. So product catalog, really. Thank you. Jesse from Grand Central.
Thanks. Yeah, I completely agree with a unified approach that Dove is talking about. I mean, this is how you provide consumer confidence. The entire, pitch for regulated cannabis is safe cannabis for consumers. That, to me, seems like a primary role that the CCB has. And by putting it out to everyone else to deal with that, and then have the CCB also be involved in it through product registration, is the least efficient way to do that. And also, it doesn't even get you the outcome you're looking for. So I think that this is a huge thing to look at for boosting consumer confidence and actually delivering on the promise of a safer product.
Thank you. I do want to give the folks on the phone a second to chime in if they would like. So it's *6 to unmute, and I'll wait just a second. And I was just looking at our website at the product registration list while Dove and Jesse were talking to see. I haven't looked at it directly in a little bit to see, what the content really looks like and how easy it is to find it and so forth. We could probably feature that maybe a little bit better on our website. Josh.
Hey, yeah, sorry, we're all signaling. Keep getting disconnected. But just short and sweet, I think product registration was another huge mistake of a thing to have in the industry. At least, preempt, like needing it to be approved before selling is a huge burden on the supply chain. It's sort of an unfair supply chain inefficiency to put on the legal business, which just holds back the development of the market as a whole. It damages product quality because of the extra time it takes to get things approved, and we can't bring things things to market and get them fresh to consumers. And that's like a really important element of product. Like personally, as a consumer, I'll take freshness over quality, like any day of the week, as like the most important, factor in my purchasing decision. Well, I would say it's the biggest impact to quality, but you know what I mean. I'll take worse, fresher weed over better, older weed anytime. So that's like a real dynamic that product registration messes up a lot. And also it's very inequitable. Some, depending on whose agent is who, registration can take 2 days or 5 weeks. And that's the difference between a company having enough cash to pay their employees or their electricity bill or not. So there are huge selective enforcement concerns I would have as the CCB, and I would eliminate that as a liability for the agency having to, deal with another lawsuit, because it is absolutely selectively applied, and speed to market is a huge advantage. And right now, some companies have that advantage and some don't.
Thank you. Appreciate that comment. I think everybody who has thoughts on these so far has talked. So I'm just like, we're now half an hour over what we said we were going to be. So maybe we'll just try to do the last two quickly. Safe food handling procedures. And I want to, this might not be as much for people who intend to like manufacture food on site, but I was thinking about this in terms of, products that I know people want to start making or manufacturing. And like I worked in a grocery store in my early 20s, and there was somebody who came around and did the temperature for the coolers and the freezer. And there were certain rules if the temperature was too high or too low for a certain amount of time, that product had to be, either moved or destroyed depending. And so I'm thinking about, and there had to be food safety training for every employee in the store. So is that something that the retail industry feels like they can do with those added sort of layer of regulation if we find a way to have the manufacturing end of those things happen? Go ahead, Michelle.
The food safety is definitely a huge concern. None of our manufacturing kitchens are inspected by the health department. They have no idea what, at the end of the day, I love my compliance officers, but they don't know how far a shelf needs to be off the ground for sanitation purposes. There's people that don't even know that's a thing. Hair nets, all that good stuff. In my opinion, the CCB has seriously dropped the ball on the sanitation aspect. There is nothing in place that requires us to check coolers, because that is a very valid point on a product going bad and consumer safety. There needs to be, at the very least, in my opinion, serve safe certifications. Maybe each retail dispensary has one manager certification and not worry about each bud tender because of high turnover. But all of the manufacturing locations, every employee should be Serve Safe certified. There should be a Serve Safe certified manager, and we should have some form of a health department inspection. I know the health department will not work with us. They literally asked me if they could shred up my application after they called me and told me they weren't going to do it. There needs to be something. I know Andy used to work for the health department, but Andy can't inspect all of us. So whether he gives a quick list of the really important things, a triple bay sink, there's people that don't even have that. They don't have a way to wash, then sanitize stuff. We definitely need to get something in place really quickly. In my opinion, that's a huge problem.
Yeah, that's why we amended the rules and disallowed the things that are not shelf stable, right? That's why we had to change that rule, was for this reason. So it's definitely why we bring it up. Thank you, Michelle. Team Magic Man.
Thank you, Julie. I just wanted to say, as a company that has produced cannabis products on the CBD side through the health department, and had a licensed kitchen, and then had them tell me, pack sand because you're going THC, we can't license you anymore. I find it really frustrating, but regardless of that, I find it to be extremely imperative to follow best practices of the health department, if not GMP emanated practices. If you are working in this industry at all, if you don't know what they are, you shouldn't be in the industry. And I really, I do have to say that I can go on Instagram and tell you who I will or wouldn't buy product from by just their photos of lack of PPE or protective gear when handling their own products. And I think it really needs to be enforced on a high level in those places. And as for a retailer, it is our responsibility once they get into our location to have proper storage, proper temperatures, proper humidity, and move these products first in, first out to have the best practices for the cultivators and for ourselves, and ultimately, number one, for our consumers. So I just want to say that we can, regardless of what's in place, we can still do that. And it obviously, I know I've spoke with the CCB about this before, but we would like to all see more support on that.
Yeah, understood.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course.
Any more on this particular topic? We'll move, just as the last topic I wanted to bring up today, and I thank you all that could hang in. It's wonderful that you're giving this feedback, and I really, really appreciate it. So event licensing. So we know the legislature did not take this up last year. Well, they did take it up. They talked about it, but it didn't move beyond discussion. What I think would be helpful is if we had, some real clear input from the industry in terms of how this could work. How could we address ID checking at events? How could we address, moving product from one place to the next? Kind of, if we're going to have food products or drink products, like how can we keep those, as we were just talking about, safe from a health and safety perspective? So go ahead, Dave. Why don't you start off with this one?
Thanks, Julie. So again, the Vermont Cannabis Action Fund was lobbying for events licenses last session. Disappointed it didn't get moved forward. We saw two proposals, one from Representative Byrong and one from James Pepper, and we were supportive of both. There's kind of, I think, three types of events in my mind. There's public events, so like concerts, think like, the beer tent at Burlington Jazz Fest. There could be a cannabis dispensing area, a cannabis consumption area. Private events, weddings, same way you would cater a wedding with alcohol, you can cater a wedding with cannabis. That's already happening. It's just happening, in an unlicensed way with unregulated product. And the third is sort of like a farmer's market sort of event. And you see that in, New York has tried that. So that's kind of three kinds of events. I think what's important is that, these events, in whatever law authorizes them, that we don't just allow sales, but also make clear that the consumption is allowed in those events because of the way the public consumption law is written now. And I think, there was some discussion about creating a safe driving plan that really had me concerned, not because the industry doesn't support, efforts to the requirement for alcohol. And I'm really hesitant to support a new requirement just on cannabis that doesn't exist on other intoxicating substances that cause far, far more impairment on drivers than cannabis does. And so to put this burden of road safety on us and only us is unfair. And while, certainly in discussions with Pepper about this, it seemed that the CCB would at least initially be quite flexible in reviewing safe driving plans. That's a personnel thing, and personnel change over time. And so I really would urge people not, would urge you, Julie, and your colleagues not to push for that specifically. And I'd also try to make it so that the opt-in, the retail opt-in does not apply to events because there are so few towns that have opted in, and it's not, not really the same level of concern. Other than that, I think, we want to see events. We want to see all kinds of events. We want the event licenses to be affordable. The alcohol events licenses are the right price, and that should be the same price for us. That's all I got.
Yeah, can I ask a couple questions, Dave, since you said so many good things? One is on the safe driving plan. It's true that when you have a wedding where you're serving alcohol, you don't have to provide a safe driving plan, but there is some responsibility on the part of the people serving, right? If I remember, like, back to my hospitality degree, right, there was a part of that was about the liability being on the bartending license, the alcohol serving license. Is that how you would approach it? Is put the responsibility on the event, whoever's providing the product at the event?
Yeah, I mean, I think, that's already in law. When we did Act 164, it's right there. The sort of host liability is identical to the alcohol language, and that's right. What is a safe driving plan for a cannabis event? I have flyers out in the event for encouraging, designated drivers. It's silly.
Okay. And then the other thought I had is on the opt-in provision, and I understand why you wouldn't want that, but towns also do have some, depending on how you do it, they do have some ability to approve or not approve, like amusement licenses or the place where events happen. There would still be some local control, perhaps, depending on how it's written in that regard, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think, towns have some local liquor license authority, and I think that is a okay model to copy. I think we just want to make sure that we're not giving, like I talked about before, we're not giving very conservative local legislative bodies the ability to say no to cannabis because they don't like cannabis, right? We as an industry are all for reasonable regulation that promotes public safety and consumer safety first and foremost. But we don't want to be discriminated against because of 80 years of stigma.
Yeah. Understood. Okay, thank you. And thanks for answering my questions too. Ebo.
Thanks. I agree wholeheartedly with what Dave was saying there. I think the different type of events would kind of require different rules, like a wedding or a consumption type of industry event, I think would be very different from like an event where you had cannabis sales on site, right? What I've seen like really successful when I was working in the California market was whatever event was going on would be tied to like a retail license. So a retailer could bring in their POS system, their track and trace. Everything could really be accounted for like the same way it is at a dispensary level. I've also seen at some events you could get tickets, like little coupons from vendors who wanted to like sample products, and then you would go to the, whether it's a trailer that's set up as a dispensary or like the little mock dispensary area, you could bring your tickets to trade in, for like a $2 or whatever. Like if you wanted to give samples out at an event, for example, you could give tickets and they come in. So there's a monetary component to it, so it could be tracked. So it could be tracked that, I know everybody wants their tax dollars, right? So like whatever, there's a monetary component to that, but maybe if it's an event license, that event license holder could then work with different retail partners in their area to have cannabis on site and to have it go through the same requirements we have to have as retailers, right? If something was being sold someplace, I would just want somebody to have to kind of jump through the same hoops that we would have to jump through to make it really like fair and equitable.
Okay. Thank you. Dylan.
Thank you guys again for letting me speak. I think event licensing is going to be very important going on in the future. I think we all agree safety is one of the most important things for everyone. And again, not to bring too many alcohol comparisons, but when we go to a concert, when we go to an event and they have an alcohol tent, they check IDs. The product that's going there is still manifested just like the way we're receiving product in retail. In this instance, I think sale through approved system or tracking, whether it's through Dutchy or whatever, that should be accurate. We should still be tracking products. And just like alcohol, we shouldn't be, serving to overly intoxicated people, same way we're running in retail. So I feel some of those logistics are most certainly have already been laid out in the past. We're just moving to a new location. Prior to coming to Vermont, I spent about 6 years in the Florida medical marijuana market. And in some of the private events, we most certainly had dispensaries, and we'll all shudder at the names Curaleaf and Trulieve, but they were able, because delivery is fully legal in the medical market, we're able to go on site, look up patient profiles, assign the product, and then have it brought directly on site. I think that, maybe the first thing isn't sales on site, but we should be able to start moving towards those. I think it would be a benefit for everyone if we had whether it's farmers market or the public event. I know that those are a little different, but for private events, farmers market, we can guarantee everyone 21 or older before you even walk through the door. If it's more of a public event, the cannabis section exclusively 21 and older, making sure that it's either open ventilation outside. However, I think a lot of these, I don't want to call them common sense, but a lot of them seem like if we just put the same rules we're applying now to this, it really shouldn't be too hard to make simple but safe and effective regulation. And maybe this is where we kind of talk about more of how smaller cultivators, or open it up to 3s and 4s as well. How can we give them permission to go on the event and do a sampling, a small sale, something to also boost that community, not to conflate our retail with grower, but with those bridges being so closely connected, how can we really spread the word for everyone in this instance? Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Dylan. I appreciate that. Team Magic Man.
Hi again. Just wanted to pipe in on this, being that we love hosting events and we love to involve our fellow cannabis businesses in our events, and we love to do good for our community. And it can be really difficult with the current event laws. And I know we've discussed this a little bit, but I would love to see you starting small, start, with some kind of small, more private events, and see how they go, pick a couple of businesses that are model compliant businesses possibly, and do a couple of test runs. Having worked in other industries and throwing events, I think this was sort of brought up, in order to have alcohol, those businesses may not have a license in my establishment, but they can go and get a license to hold that event, and they are liable and responsible. And I do think a combination of that with the, a combination of protocols for delivery of cannabis that involve maybe, strong security, manifestation, insurance, and put all of that stuff in place and kind of tie that together to create some kind of a license would be an interesting idea. But I will say there's, for us, we've, this is really important to us, because we've been trying to throw events and involve our community, and it's been really hard because the liability is on us, and we involve our fellow community members, and then they aren't always compliant. So we need the whole industry to work with us to make sure this happens and to be on the same page. So I just would really like to see it be just a little bit more more collaborative, but also for people to be a little bit more. We're only going to get this to happen if we set the right example and do the right thing. And that's what I hope we can all do. Thank you.
Thank you. Eddie.
Yeah, thank you again. Yeah, event licensing. So for me, I think it should be the board's first priority to push legal consumption, public consumption for all. We shouldn't need a specific cannabis event in order for patrons to smoke cannabis at, say, a music festival or, something outdoor where people are allowed to smoke cigarettes. We need to make this, we need to make it a more level playing field, and we need to legalize consumption so that people can consume safely and consume their medicine where they need to. So I think that should be the priority here before we open up licensures for people to sell to people to smoke at that event that they're not even legally allowed to smoke at. If I throw events in the state, and you could get in trouble for allowing people to smoke at a ticketed event. That's a public event. So how are you going to allow someone to sell cannabis at that event if the event person could then get in trouble from the state for allowing consumption? I think that's backwards. I think we need to focus on consumption. And then go into event licenses. Yet there shouldn't be a reason why we can't have events, but we need to focus on that consumption aspect first, in my opinion. And then sales come later. Selling it on premise, that's going to take some rules for sure. And who should be able to do that? It should be, direct to consumer sales would help that immensely. They should be able to set up farmers markets, farm stands on their farms and sell their product. That is, and then after that, then we can go, oh, you can go to a farmer's market, you can go to an event and sell your cannabis. People can consume it there legally and not have an issue. So that's my opinion on the event licensing. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Eddie. Noah.
Oh, I think my hand was up.
Oh, sorry. Josh. Yep, I missed you. Go ahead, Josh.
No worries. Hi, everyone. Hi again. I just want to echo what Eddie said. We definitely fully agree with that. It's like putting the cart in front of the horse a little bit to focus on sales when we're still not allowed to consume anywhere in the state publicly. And then we don't see why the event licensing should be controlled by retailers. We think that, we support direct sales. We think we're building a cottage industry in this state that's unique from the rest of the country, that's built on all the hard work our growers do. I think a lot of people get nervous early on in the industry for a lot of reasons, personal and business, and it's understandable, but the greed mentality is very short-sighted. So trying to commandeer and own or have exclusivity or, government protected access to certain activities, like being able to sell cannabis at events, is, not something that we think is good for the industry or even good for businesses as a whole, even though it might look tempting from a short-term greedy, purview. We need to help build the scene, help develop it, instead of thinking of how like our retail licenses can own and control event licensing. We should all be thinking about how we can make the best event and then let it do what it does. So we think it's sort of counterintuitive to a lot of the other goals of the market, runs counter to a lot of the other goals of the market to have events be solely a retail thing.
Thank you. Noah.
I, being in the events world, being a wedding venue, being a bar and music, promoter, I think I just wanted to offer that I think we have a major problem brewing in the alcohol industry. We have most difficult liability framework in the country that is shutting down bars currently. There's a recent article, recent-ish in 7 Days about this. To learn more, the dram shop laws are very punitive and have skyrocketed insurance for liquor liability. And I would be very worried about putting any liability for consumption on our cannabis businesses. I don't think we will get insurance for sure. And if we did, it wouldn't be affordable. And if we're stuck with any sort of indication of liability, we're going to have, that could be a recipe for increased problems. And in that context, I agree that we should be creating legal consumption. I agree with that. We need that. Also, I would rather us, because I think the liability insurance is going to be such an issue from my perspective, I would rather us get sales. And I think that's a simpler thing. I would rather not have to deal with consumption. Let's get sales at events. And end of the day, people choose to consume illegally now where they choose to consume. I'd rather leave that up to the consumer to decide and the owners of the properties to deal with the consequences rather than taking on any liability for that.
Thanks, Noah. I wondered about the, in fact, earlier in this conversation, I was wondering about the insurance too. Like, will people be able to get a rider on their insurance? And if they can, is it going to be affordable such that making, having an event, they're going to be able to actually make money or be able to afford to have the event? I've been wondering about that. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
So far, like quickly, like any insurance, anytime I've endeavored towards that, if the word cannabis is mentioned, the price and the access is extremely limited. I can't imagine in this environment you're going to have insurance companies touching this, but
yeah,
I may be wrong.
understood. Yeah, thank you. Jesse.
I think that I really agree with this language around the cart before the horse. Like, if we are creating a welcoming environment for cannabis and this industry, which is our job, all of us that are on this call, that are all here for 2 hours, are committed to this. And the CCB should really do some soul searching around, do you want to have this prohibitive environment where you create all these rules and you struggle to enforce them or even interpret them? Or are we going to open this up and say, and be truthful to ourselves? Vermonters smoke weed. We make some of the best weed in the world here. And it's some of the best places to smoke weed and get high are here in these Green Mountains. If we want to elevate this state, combat some of these flood costs that we have to open our doors. And that means saying to the world, you can come to Vermont and smoke weed. Okay, all the rest will fall into place once the word is out that you can smoke weed here in your Airbnb or in your outside, come on. That is what needs to happen, is public consumption. And we have support from the legislature for this. So I think it's very simple. You open the doors to public consumption and the rest will fall into place. Like Eddie said, it's going to take some time to work out those rules. We all want to get there. But if we don't do that first, we're just creating a big mess to regulate and to commercialize. And weed isn't about commercializing, it's about sharing and opening your mind to abundance. Not I want to be the one that's selling weed at the event. So those are my thoughts. We have to be true to ourselves as Vermonters and open up weed.
Thanks, Jesse. This will be the last comment since we have been at 2 hours, and I appreciate folks, particularly staff and folks attending for hanging in the herb closet.
You guys hear me?
We can, yes.
So, I will, I'll just send it back because what I wanted to say was kind of touched on. And so just for time and it was kind of touched on already.
All right. Well, thank you. Thanks for chiming in a little bit and raising your hand. And then just to give folks a sense, like this is not the end of the conversation. This is the beginning of the conversation. So, you know, you've got my email address, you've got the public comment portal online to submit more comments. Of course, for anything on here that will require rulemaking, that will go through a formal process where, you know, folks who went through those processes with us before know that there's lots of opportunity to public comment. And then I'll just end by saying there are two more of these, one with Chair Pepper on manufacturing and one with Commissioner Harris on cultivators. And you can see the dates up there and you will get, you'll see it in our typical messages that Patrick sends out. And I appreciate everyone, you know, taking the time. Have a great
Thank
day,
you.
everybody.